right, good afternoon and welcome everyone to the final breakout session of the day at Bureau Conference 2019. I am joined up here by Dan Wilkinson, the co-founder and CEO of Smarter Analytics. He's going to be presenting another half-hour block followed by a 15-minute Q&A on the topic of lead score, web visitors for killer remarketing, upsell, and exit intent strategies using GTM. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dan and he will kick things off.
All right, thank you very much. Does that sound interesting? I mean, lead scoring visitors the moment that they land on your website is basically what we're going to be talking about. The upsell, exit intent, and remarketing strategies, by and large, I'll leave up to you because we'll tell you how you can use these as triggers to get those things rolling. But it's the sky's the limit in terms of what your imagination can think of you can use this for. So, outcomes to this session, we're going to be lead scoring web visitors, applying this to remarketing lists on any PPC network that accepts custom tracking, and applying the lead scoring to your current web visitors session, and also how to use this to increase AOV conversion rate with upsell and exit intent strategies. I've been using this for a good couple of months with my clients and they're doing really well out of it. So I'm also going to give you a GTM container that you can download. This session gets a little bit technical. Can I have a quick show of hands? Who knows how to JavaScript? Oh, quite a few, that's great. Everybody familiar with how to do HTML, adding in IDs and classes into HTML tags? So those two things, you don't need to do JavaScript, but the more you know JavaScript, the more you can customize this. It is a bit of a plug-and-play container, so it works, but you do have to be adding classes and IDs to the markup of the landing pages. Okay, so nice to meet you. I'm Dan, company called Smarter Analytics. We also go by another name as well, which is PageSpeed.agency, where we focus a lot on page speed for getting websites faster because algorithms hate slow sites, and it tends to play havoc with data collection and all the rest of it. So please feel free, take pictures, share on Twitter as much as possible. And my Twitter handle is Smarter Analytics without an E in it. And on Facebook, we're PageSpeed.agency. Big warning to you, this can quickly get complicated. It ties my head up in knots many times, even just half an hour ago trying to get one extra thing added in for you. But we're simplifying this wherever possible. So, lead scoring web visitors for killer remarketing, upsell, and exit intent strategies using Google Tag Manager. Everyone familiar with Google Tag Manager? Anyone not familiar with Google Tag Manager? That's good, great, okay. Points to consider before starting. Unless the website is fast, this is pretty useless. We are tracking behavioral patterns. Nothing upsets behavioral patterns like a really slow or dysfunctional website because people get frustrated and start behaving in erratic ways. So what happens then is it pollutes our data. It's taking down the wrong scores for the wrong things as people are trying to click on random things or scroll up and down looking for an answer to something. So fast site is critical, functional site is critical. If you're trying to put this on a website that isn't functional and isn't very fast, then you really want to make sure it's both of those things. The dictionary definition, I looked this up the other day on Google. I just typed in slow definition, and it was quite precise that it says anything moving, happening, or doing something that takes longer than 2.9 seconds. I mean, it's written down there, it's a proof, right? If a website loads in any longer than 2.9 seconds, it's officially slow, and therefore this will not work. It has to be under that. If you've got any problems getting it below 2.9 seconds, visit PageSpeed.agency and we'll be happy to help. So, anyone familiar with this diagram? The hierarchy of conversions, a little bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Site page speed is in the functionality box at the bottom. Everything we're talking about in this session is going towards the top quite a lot. So we're enhancing the usability, intuitiveness, and the persuasive nature of the website by putting these tactics into place. So today's agenda: the visitor lead score concept, the process and how we get there, and finally I've got some usage examples for you. So quite a simple agenda so far. I'll then give you access to the Done For You GTM container, and then any questions, please use the app. You might have questions throughout the throughout the process part. So what I was thinking was maybe we should stop once or twice in there to answer questions at that point because it might make better sense. But I'm not sure if you've got a real good question to ask at that point. Raise your hand and we'll see what the questions are. So the concept is, the way that I arrived at this idea was I had Infusionsoft, and Infusionsoft tracks visitors and starts giving you information about the visitors in a different way to Google Analytics. And I was thinking, Google Analytics, personal identifiable information, keeping records on people, all against the Google rulebook, but can I feed information into Infusionsoft with anonymous visitors? And the answer was no. I tried every hack I could possibly conceive trying to get information into Infusionsoft, and I just could not find it. So I started thinking, how can I apply CRM standard lead scoring to visitors without it upsetting Google and be able to apply that later on when somebody converts? Well, that's where this idea is born out of. So what are we doing? We're tracking the behavioral activities of users and we're giving them scores. So a CRM might give a member on your list a score, like, this person's worth a 10, hot lead. What we've done since then is we've made it multi-dimensional. So we're giving people many scores for many different things. This helps us get deeper into the machine and program much better stuff. We store their scores in the session, so these scores are accessible from the moment that the page loads until they leave the site. We send their scores to analytics as custom dimensions. We send their scores to the PPC networks, and you can tap into them at any point. It's the secret behind making sure that we're not crossing any red lines with Google is that we encode everything. So that's how we do that. So why do we want to do this? We can profile 10 to 100 times more people because lead scoring has only really been available to people that convert, and you've got their details and you can start adding stuff to those details. We build a profile of the entire audience. We increase conversion rates and average order value, and we can supercharge our remarketing campaigns by using this data. Dynamic behavioral actions. I'm not sure why I put that bullet point in now, but we'll move on. We plan, so how do we do this? So the first thing we need to do is we need to plan in advance what it is that we're going to want to track and achieve. Knowledge is the power, which brings us that competitive edge over other people not doing anything quite like this. So we mark up the key website elements with HTML classes and IDs, as already mentioned, and we create event listeners using GTM triggers and custom JavaScript tags. And then we calculate a score for each interaction within the key elements that we want to track. Then these scores can be used to analyze behaviors and sell more stuff or get more leads. So here's the process. Part number 1, the 5 Ps rule. Anyone familiar with the 5 Ps? Yeah? Plan, 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 and do some more planning. 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. Absolutely the case. So forget what you think is not possible. At this stage, it's very creative and we want to get our imaginations going. What is it that we want to do? Anything that happens on a web page is trackable, and if it's trackable, then we can apply a score to it. So be creative in the planning. So the first thing that I like to do is create a wish list of behaviors that I want to create. So I've pulled some random ones. Some might be time on part of a page. It's not time on page, that's readily accessible inside of Google Analytics, so we want to define it even more. So part completing a form. How do we know how many, we know how many people completed a form, that's the conversion rate. How many people nearly completed the form, or completed the form and didn't press the button, or completed the form and thought about pressing the button, but something told them not to, just at the last second. Returning to parts of the site or the page. Meticulously looking at product images. I've been tracking behaviors like this where people just cannot decide which variant they're going to buy. There's 3 types of blue and they can't pick one. And then they abandon the site because they are faced with too much choice. Reading, scanning certain paragraphs. By reading, I mean taking an interest, and by scanning, I mean kind of scrolling past it rather quickly. That is virtually impossible for them to have read and digested the content. Time spent hovering over add to cart or submit buttons. This one's a big thing. I think that a lot of people when they're going to buy a particularly inexpensive item or are going to give a lot of details over to a company in which to become a lead. Just as they're going to press that button, they have an attack of, what are these people going to do with my data? Are they legit? They're about to charge my card. And they start asking questions right at that moment. And behaviours will be that they'll be centred around that area. And we can set timers over the add to cart button. Maybe if they don't do anything in 9 seconds, pop up a pop-up and just say, hey, what's the problem? Would you like to engage in a conversation with us or something like that? So lots of things that we can do. So I don't really know why. I called this the matrix. this next part, the planning part, is the matrix. And why? Well, because it's a matrix. Like that, plain and simple. I love these kind of things. They make perfect sense and they're very logical and help you get creative ideas onto a bit of a mind map. So all we need to do is create an ID for a thing on the page. So I like to keep these very dimensional. So A might be forms, B might be products, C might be a variant type, and then the numbering down the side is identifying which one on the page. Many websites are template based, so like every product page on a Shopify site, for example, you can mark up the template and then you get the same printout of variables on every single page, whether there's 10 SKUs or 50,000 SKUs. It's exactly the same in many WordPress sites, unless you make a completely new page for every page on the website. But there's common sense, but commonality of printing these out onto the pages as element IDs. So I love matrices for logical thinking. We can convert behaviors to a simple code that's keeping it dimensional down to the element type. And the reason that we want to keep it dimensional is you can mix and blend dimensions really easy. But if you've got A is a paragraph type, B is a paragraph type, C is a paragraph type, this starts getting really messy and we don't really want to do it that way. You can have more A's. The numbers identify which element target the element IDs, and there's no limit to dimensions. Fewer is easier to manage. The more dimensions that you put in, the more traffic you need. So it might be best just to start on 2 or 3 to start off with and then increase as you go along. There's no limit to numbers because we want to put that number, might be the product ID of a product, or it might be a form ID, or it might be a page ID, etc. So the matrix recoded, this is what it should look like when we're finished. So A1, A2, A3, A4, B1, B2, B3, B4, etc. That makes sense? Anyone? Have I lost anyone yet? That's a good thing. We're all awake. Great. Okay, the process part 2 is marking up the HTML pages, the templates, with classes and IDs. Now the trick here is to use only one class for all of them. And what we're doing with the class is we're telling GTM which elements to track. And then the IDs, which is A1, A2, A3, A4, etc., is the element identifying itself to GTM, which is the bit that's really important. So all technical stuff is already set in the GTM container. You can install it and it'll start doing this for you straight away. I've spent a lot of time the last 14 days to make this as variable oriented as possible so that it doesn't really matter what you label the IDs as, it doesn't really matter what actions you're choosing to track, so that we can make this as easy as possible to implement. Stick with the defaults to avoid GTM modifications. Technical GTM modifications, but you're going to get the best results if you can modify this to suit your own needs, etc. So, number 1, element classes. Add a single class to all elements you want to track. The default class is in the container is TRCK, which I think stands for track. Track this element. Element IDs. Each of the matrix IDs to the element that they apply to. If the elements already have IDs, and I'm not going into too much detail, I don't come across many websites where every element that already has IDs. They tend to get missed off quite a lot. But if they do, either use those IDs, you can use those IDs, convert using a simple JavaScript lookup table in GTM, or use data attributes instead. Example 1, markup, say buttons. Existing HTML, div class equals btn. You got the button code, closing div, right? So the new markup would be button space TRCK and then add an ID, B1. Button number 2 might look like that, so B2. Paragraphs. You might go paragraph number 1, there's no class in there to begin with, so it would just be class equals TRCK, and then the ID would be P1. Everyone clear on that? Yeah, easy, right? It's the easy step. Okay, brilliant. The process, part 3, is creating the event listeners using GTM triggers and variables. And this is kind of where we kind of start dipping further into more complexity. Everyone familiar with GTM triggers? Got all those there. You can use all of those. I've missed a few off that aren't very good to use, but all of those can be used to help you score someone's activity. We've got variables. All these variables we can use. I've unticked the ones that I feel aren't so useful, but you can find ways of using them. It's very fluid. There's no right or wrong here. So, WordPress sites get a bonus. Duracell's Tommy Google Tag Manager plugin. I think it's brilliant because of the amount of data layer injections it provides, and you can make use of all of those. Create the variables. All of the variables that are in that app are also in the GTM container, so you don't have to do anything. Okay, how to track the activity? Well, you have web pages marked up correctly. We can combine the triggers and variables to create a criteria for scoring. We create GTM events to capture the data as a kind of snapshot at that moment in time. And then we push that data to GTM using the data layer. The data layer we want to make as dynamic as possible. We don't want it overwriting its own value, so we've included some dynamic keys in there as well. GTM triggers are great, but they have some limitations. Definitely start off using GTM triggers and get used to the process, and then start customizing in more detail further down the line. Some have quite severe limitations, like they'll tell you when an object starts but not when it finishes, or when it appears but doesn't tell you when it disappears, that kind of thing. Often there's a missing variable that you need, therefore. So what we've done is we've created like a multi-event listener that's in the container using some of Simo's Ahava's work. Everyone heard of Simo? This guy is amazing. It's my first point of reference. The moment I'm stuck, you can spend hours on Google looking for a solution, and this tends to be the only place you find the solution. Really, really good stuff. I would recommend just going there. So we're using this custom event listener. The only thing is in here he's got the word drag start. We've changed that to mouse overs, mouse enters, mouse leaves, and things like that, tracking mouse movements. So what paragraphs did the user read? The answer to that is the element viewability trigger. We're using the scroll variable, and we capture the duration of the element visibility. So we're able to kind of tell whether someone's reading a paragraph whilst that paragraph is on the screen, or they could be scanning through it really quickly. So the output is the speed in which the paragraph was consumed. We'll score high for slow movements, and we'll score low for fast movements. And then the score, oh, sorry, I'm going to get back onto that in a minute. What forms were part or fully completed but not submitted? Track clicks in the form fields, key up down actions, and then the number IDs of the fields filled, so we can track all of that. The output is a known misconversion. So the conversion rate now strictly isn't, oh well, it's 10% sign-up rate, 90% of people will treat all equally, came and they left and they didn't convert, 10% of people did convert and we like them. But what about being able to dissect the 90% that didn't convert and say, do you know what, 20% nearly pressed the button. So we can easily get our conversion rate up to 30% if we found out why they didn't click the button. So this is about finding out exactly what went wrong. Did they hover over the submit button? So we go one step deeper. And we start to understand the level of confidence they're having right at the point that they are going to convert. Now, quick note, I felt it important to say this, do not record and store entries into the fields. It's against the terms and conditions of Google. It's actually possible that they don't need to submit the button. You can still get all of their details, but they'll be a bit surprised when you contact them saying, hey, why didn't you press the submit button? And could report you for privacy invasion. If you live where I live in the European Union, then that's I think it's going to be a prison sentence anytime soon. This is an example screenshot of the element visibility trigger inside of GTM. So we've got little options here like this one. Every time an element appears on the screen, element selector TRCK. So this is going to trigger every time an element with TRCK as an element is going to appear on the screen. Sorry, we're using the CSS selector up here, so that this trigger will fire multiple times on the page, allowing us to easily track the visibility of elements on the screen. The custom HTML version of this, what we're doing here is we've got two listeners. We're listening for when a mouse enters a field and when the mouse leaves the field. And then we're capturing the time in which it starts and the time which it finishes to work out how long it was inside of an element for. And things we can do with that kind of information is we can start scoring. If they were hovering over it for more than 5 seconds, let's give them a score of 5. If they were hovering in there for 1 second, let's give them a low score of 1, etc. So that brings into part 4 of the process, is calculating a score for each interaction with the key elements. So each trackable element needs to have a score. We need to apply a value for that. I've reserved 0 for nothing tracked. So we don't really want to use 0 and 1 for yes or no. You can use 1 or 2 instead. Having a range allows for ranking of element importance. As we get more complex with this, we're tracking lots and lots of different paragraphs, and they scored a 6 on paragraph A1, but they scored a 7 on paragraph A2. Paragraph A1 is talking about something completely different to the paragraph on A2, but when you want to use the action, you want to go with the score they scored the highest on. That's why I like to have a range of numbers. So I tend to use 1 to 9 as the score range. Scores should not be a dimensional metric like milliseconds of hover, or because every single score will be completely different. It's the chances are, so we need to apply them to buckets of scoring. Any questions? Everyone up to speed with me? That's good, we're nearly finished. So the example is the reader reads a P element. What we tracked was the scroll speed over the element whilst it was visible. The element is the paragraph, letter code A. They're scored by the length of time they scrolled over the element. This indicated that the user will either read, scan or skip the content. Possible outcome, A1-5. A1 equals a P element, the first instance of a P element, and 5 is that the user read the content in A1. Another possible outcome could be A7-1. A7 being a P element, the 7th instance on the page, and then 1, the user skipped the content by the time they got that far down the page. We can use that data in a number of different ways. Was it the paragraph they didn't like, or were they getting bored of the page when they got halfway down? Who knows? So the way that we do this is we use the data layer. Everyone's familiar with the data layer? Anyone not too familiar with the data layer? How it works and stuff. Okay, the data layer, quick refresh. What is the data layer? It's a window object that is used to pass information from your website to your Tag Manager container. A window object is basically server information that comes through with the website. And what we do is we create a data layer element, a push. I'm going on to that. What is a data layer push? It's a JavaScript that pushes dynamic data into the data layer for GTM to use. So it could be customer ID, it could be product ID, it could be all these other kinds of information that we want available at that moment in time. So we use the data layer to pull that information from the server and push it into the client side, into the browser, so that we've got all that information available to us. Again, this is all already built into the GTM container. Why is this important? Well, we depend on the data layer to show GTM how the user is interacting with the website, because they're interacting with the website installed in their browser, not inside of GTM. GTM needs to be able to find somewhere to read what's going on, and that's what we use the data layer for, is to read the activities of the user. So how does the data layer work exactly? It's a JavaScript object notation, formatted set of dynamic variables. The snapshot of the variables accessible are upon the event. So an event might be they move their mouse out of an area, and then we calculate a lead score based on that interaction right there. The JSON keys get added. The data layer will store all push keys and values. Now that might be time over button, that's a key, and the value is 6 seconds. So that's what the key and value is. The data layer will overwrite duplicate keys and values. That's really important, that we've got to capture that data as soon as it happens and put it somewhere else where it didn't get overwritten so easily. Included in the GTM container, we've included some dynamic tags which work really, really well. We want to track and score all track elements, the TRCK elements, so we're not tracking every element on the page, but we are certainly going in to track the elements. Okay, this is an example of our data layer push. We've got the fixed keys and we have dynamic outputs there. But on some of the keys, we've added dynamic variables to them to make the keys dynamic themselves, so the data layer can build up many, many instances of the same thing without overwriting them. A pre-calculation data layer push to make all variable known to GTM. The events labeled lead event shows up and push parts required to calculate the score. So we've got lead event B1, so the event itself is labeling the element which it's talking about, and then we have over here, which one's the laser? Oh yeah, we have over here, track element class is telling us that the TRCK is there. The element is B1, and we know that the event is mouse leave and the Unix time in which that happened. So we can start using this information in our data layer. This is the data layer as it stood at that point. And then this is the bit that we're really interested in. We're able to dynamically create a mouse leave event and a mouse enter event, and all we need to do is take one of those numbers from the other to give us milliseconds hover over the page, and we can do that. So how do we calculate a score from that? We create a calculation variable. So we might say the variation here is hover time. The hover time equals the mouse leave time minus the mouse enter time, and that gives us a value in milliseconds. So if over 1 second but below 2 seconds, score equals 1. So we could write a code like that, etc. This is what the calculation variable will look like. Might look a little bit daunting. If you read it carefully, it's quite easy to understand. If the hover time is under 150 milliseconds, score 0. If it's between 150 and 500, score a 1. If it's over 9 seconds, score 9. That's basically what this table is saying. Okay. Then we push another data layer push into the data layer, which shows us a score for that, and that updates with a score. So there we go. We've got event lead score update B1 8 seconds on that hovering over that button. If we start tracking multiple elements, we want to build a table like this. This is what the JSON file looks like. So you've got B1 6, A4 7, A7 4, B2 6. That's what it looks like. Then we can create other variables out of them. So we can push these to Google Analytics or to various other places. So we can do that. A couple of usage examples. I think the best thing is to get the container and have a good play around. And if you really break the container, remove it and install it again. That's how I kind of roll with it. So we want to create a cookie, triggered every time the lead score is updated. We can store that in the browser. Personal identifiable information is okay to store as cookies because it's only in their browser, but don't let them end up in GA. GTM tag, auto-populate previous page view lead scores, allows for the session lead score values, etc. Analytics part 1, we can create dynamic Google Analytics behavior event, triggered every time that the lead score is updated. We ensure that there's no PIIs are recorded in there. We create, so that's just creating like a usual event in the behavioral reports. We can create a custom dimension, setting the GA settings variable, updates in every event. Carefully select the right scope. Everyone's familiar with custom dimensions in GA? Yeah, prerequisite, you know how to use GA. The user and session scopes will overwrite previous ones, recommended with multi-page DLPs, but I like to use the session scope because we can say on that session they were doing it this way, on that session they were doing it that way. Hit scope will create multiple scores for the same event, so you might go A1 6, A1 7, A1 1, and that's not really that useful for us, so avoid the hit scope version. This is the screenshot of how I've set up the event inside of GA, and the custom dimension as well. So that's you can have the slides to download. I've got a link for you in a second. Google Analytics Part 2, use custom dimensions as secondary dimensions. You can use them as custom segments. You can use them in advanced audience definitions, hence the part of being able to apply that to remarketing lists. So you've got lead score there. On the custom segments, you can start applying the start defining which scores you want to see. In Google Ads, you can create custom dimensions and segments to build valuable audiences, and then find common high lead scores amongst converters, and then apply that as a remarketing audience to carry on attracting the same kind of people. And you can use that to use to similar to audiences and the like. I'm hurrying up because I'm aware that we're running out of time. Facebook ads, we use the GA audience data, so you find out which of the audiences are the best ones using Google Analytics, and then we take the variables that we're using, so the lead scores that we're using in those with those audiences, and then send custom tracks over to Facebook in order to define the same audiences inside of Facebook. So we can then create lookalike audiences. We can do exactly the same thing in Quora. We can do the same thing in Twitter, Pinterest, and just about all of the PPC networks work in the same way, where we can send custom events into the pixels, and that's how we get all the other PPC networks. Exit intent. You know more about their session as these lead scores are being calculated up. Dynamically provide the correct messages, point of page abandonment, so you can get a lot of information out of what they're going. So a great conversion rate increase strategy is someone abandoning a page after taking an action shows hesitation, so that you know that there's an objection. So you can pop up at that moment in time and ask them if everything's okay, would like to speak to somebody. Is it the price, or is it something else? You start using that to drill into why people might want to leave at that point. Upsell, cross-selling. Again, you know more about the user in their session. Create lead score based actions, and then you can show different, they're showing different engaging levels product by product. You can do like an in-cart upsell to the product they didn't add to the cart that scored the highest. We're doing a lot of things like that in Shopify at the moment. So that's a really good average order value strategy. Great conversion rate increase. The user adds address and triggers exit intent when shipping charge become visible. Guess what the next the next idea is? Exit pop with free shipping at that moment in time when they're in the cart. A great lead strategy, exit intent after consuming sections of content. We've already covered that one. Did you know type headline? My best example is a weight loss page that has an element that talks about keto. They focus in on that. They're about to leave, and you say, "Would you like to know more about keto dieting," or something like that? And then you can take them to more relevant content. Or if they leave very quickly, you give them a quiz. I quite like quizzes because it's a cheap, easy way of getting an audience built. A great conversion rate increase strategy. Ads, address, triggers, exit. Hang on a minute. This is a repeat slide, is it? Yeah, sorry, that slide has come in twice. So please steal my container. It's on that address there. Some of the very best work that I've done using GTM has gone into creating this container, and I'm updating it all the time. So come back next week, the week after, and download it again and see what's different. I'll keep it up to date as much as I can. Personalize it, make it yours. Take the time to understand the mechanics behind the tags. It'll be super valuable to being able to really affect how you interact with the audience on a personalization basis. On this page there's a GTM container download, this slide deck, and hopefully a recording of this session either later on today or tomorrow, etc. Thank you very much for attending this session. If anyone's got any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, so I know you said these slides will be available and hopefully the recording as well. If anyone has any questions, please submit them in the app, but otherwise we could probably field some questions free reign, since we do have some time remaining. So, anyone have any specific questions? Come over with the mic for you.
Around how much time do you spend on a particular client getting everything all rigged up so it's good to go?
If you install the GTM container, all you need to do is to add the tags of the IDs and the HTML plans. You have to fill out the classes and the IDs, and then it'll start tracking stuff. In particular, hovering in and out of elements. You start getting data straight away. You can do that, 15-20 minutes.
Are these universal? Are these universal concepts that work with all tag management platforms, such as Excite?
This is a Google Tag Manager container. I don't know if you can install it somewhere else, but the concept is going over the is using HTML5 compatible with all browsers, etc. So you shouldn't have any problems using different tag managers or whatever. You can even take the code and install it straight onto the server and run it from there as well. Tag manager is better though, doing it that way. I think the concept itself is fairly unique at this moment. I don't think anyone else is doing it.
Yeah, which would you say, I know it varies across vertical and industry, but of the different tags that you've installed.
So I can't hear what you're saying, sorry.
Hello? Okay, there we go. Understandably, it varies across industry, vertical, B2B, B2C, but for the ones that you've installed, which would you say would be like your top 5 that you need to have installed and tracking on a daily basis to get some really good ROI? Because some I can imagine is like, when you're just going through so much information, a lot of it just becomes white noise, so I would just like your top 5, top 3.
Yeah, I think keeping it as simple as possible, so anything that you can track that's really easy to get the numbers and understand what's going on, because you don't need to be having complex tracks over different things, but if you know that form fields are being filled out and they hovered over the button, you've got 2 pieces of information to take away from that. That's probably my favourite one, because you're catching otherwise who would be converters instead of, so that's probably my favorite one. The rest I'm kind of using the hovers a lot, and I'm applying the readability over paragraphs to try and get where people's heads are at a moment they start taking a drastic action, like trying to leave the page or something like that, using an exit intent. So that's 3 really, but you can use those 3 for just about anything, I think.
Do you also add this code to every page?
You have GTM on every page. You have GTM container code on every page or in the template somewhere. Everything else just runs from GTM. Yeah, you don't have to add any more. You might want to put a data layer push to pull server variables if that's required. But you'd probably build that into the GTM code or apply it just above it.
For companies that are changing their website a lot for conversion rate optimization purposes, how does that impact this process of lead scoring? Does it create problems, or is it not a big problem?
If they're always adding IDs to all the HTML elements, it's just a matter, if they make a big change like completely redesign a page or something, you just want to make sure that you've got the TRCK in the classes that you want to track. So it only takes a few minutes to do that. The more you can have that happen automatically, I wouldn't advise a developer to say, please include TRCK in the classes, because it'll be trying to track every element on the page, which makes the page very busy and gives you a lot of data you don't need. But yeah, as a marketer, go in and choose the classes that you want to track yourself, for sure. But it's not a big job, it's quite an easy, quick job.
Have you noticed that GTM actually slows the page speed?
GTM does not, but GA does. You can do that yourself. Actually, do you know what? I'll raise that question. There is 2 variables you can pull data out of from the browser. So you can say session start time and the page onload time are both variables inside of the browser, so you can pull them straight out and run a page speed variable against, straight through GTM. I can put that in if anyone wants me to put that in. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Another question just came up. How is this different to eye tracking or heat mapping?
Heat mapping doesn't allow you to record values against their actions and identify the audience. It just tells you, on average, out of 1,000 visitors, what people did with heat mapping. You can't use that data to carry on targeting those people. That's a big fundamental difference.
All right. Any other questions?
So this doesn't require any actual changing of the HTML or CSS or anything?
No, only for adding the CSS classes to the elements you want to track and adding the IDs from the matrix. That's the only modification to the site. I'm still working on a way around that, so you don't have to touch the site once GTM's in there. Haven't quite got there with it yet, but still, yeah.
All right, so I guess that's all the time we had. If anyone wants to stick around and pick Dan's brain, please do so. But otherwise, please give another round of applause for Dan. And have a great rest of your day.
if everyone wants to score me high and say that what my content was totally unique, I'd really appreciate it. Hi, you're right.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I have a question. Is there a way to use this in order to create kind of like a kill code so once people come through, purchase, and go back to Wave, we can exclude them from serving any ads after they've already purchased?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they take a particular action and you can give them a score, so you might want to give them, or even an event name or something for that, you can then go and create, as long as you can identify them in GA, you can then create the remarketing list out of it. But you might be able to do that just with GA alone without all of this anyway. So you might be able to do it that way. But what you could also do then is if you identify something that excludes those people, that singles them out, you can fire Facebook tracks to exclude them from Facebook as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi.
Bertzol, nice to meet you. No
Nice to meet
question, just killer content, man.
Oh,
Great
good,
way to end
good.
it. Love it. As far as like things take away, straight away.
Yeah.
Blow it away, man.
Yeah, that was a prerequisite of the condition. I was going to charge everyone £5 for that, but never mind.
Really
Nice
cool
to meet you.
content. Yeah, it's a really cool presentation. Awesome.
I've got cards here actually as well. If you want one.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I just will ask you regarding sharing information, sharing data from Google Analytics to Facebook. If I know Facebook is pretty closed system, and how it's possible to send this lead score to Facebook?
So in there is an event that is sending the data to GA. Just create a Facebook track, custom track Facebook tag. I think there's one in there. There'll be one in there in about an hour time anyway. I'm going to go and add one, I think. And then all you need to do is assign what information you want to send over. So you can send over the lead score every time a new lead score is generated against the person that created it. So you can keep them
just
separate.
collect this data in Google Analytics, and
Yeah.
you can send it back to Facebook.
Yeah,
for
because
retargeting.
with analytics we're sending lead scores individually as events, but in the custom dimension we're sending them as a group of lead scores that you can tap into. But with Facebook you just want to send all the individual scores to the pixel and pepper the pixel with more data and do it that way.
I
So
get it. And then, which channel do you use usually for remarketing?
say again, sorry.
Which channels then you use for retargeting?
I use all of them. I tend to try and get it into all of them. So using with custom audiences inside of Facebook, Quora, Twitter, all of those, it's just using those numbers. So we want anyone that's got A1 scored higher than 5, that kind of thing, because it's being pulled over as numeric values. So you can do a greater than 5 or lower than 4, that kind of thing. So you can be quite specific with the tracks. Google Analytics is slightly different, but you can just use the custom segments to define the audience and then upload as an audience and put that in Google Ads. So yeah.
And how to upload this audience in Facebook?
How do you?
To upload this audience?
Yeah,
to
with a Facebook custom track tag. There'll be one in the container in about an hour's time, I think. If you wait to download it, there'll be one in there in a bit, I think.
I get it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I just want to say thanks. Awesome presentation.
Oh, good.
I had a question for you just about like if your Google Tag Manager just becomes inundated with like old tracking pixels and stuff. Because you had mentioned how like Google Tag Manager doesn't slow down, won't slow down your page speed. But if you have like a number of like triggers and variables that are just running in there that you're not necessarily using, that won't slow down your page speed at all.
All tags that are in there, they're all after the onload event. They all fire. The listeners happen. The listeners fire on DOM ready, so that you have to do that so that they get into the HTML so they can be listening out for the scripts. But the all of the tags, everything else that they run after the page is interactive, so it won't affect the page speed at all. There'll be zero influence on the page speed.
And then when you're tracking the page speeds, what like are you using like Google Page Speed Insights or what are you using?
No, I use GA to track everything. With the Page Speed Insights is a moment in time how they find your website. It's a big con when people trying to improve page speed. You want to do it in GA using the page speed things, and all you're doing is you're tracking the moment that the request goes through in Unix time, and then you're tracking when it onload event happens, and just one from the other, and you got
The
page
reason
speed.
I ask is because our reps are always pitching that, right? Our Google reps are always like,
Yeah.
and that's what they're showing us, and that's the tool that they're using for
Yeah.
it, right? And it's like, and my development team's like, no, this isn't the case. And then I removed some stuff out that was old out of our container, and then I saw some pages or some scores increase on that. But really, what that could have been was just the time that I was running the test.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think PageSpeed score, PageSpeed Insights is a bit. It's not really giving you real user data.
Yeah.
Who cares what the score is? You want to know how happy your users are, right? And do it that way. I did one the other week. I reduced the page load time from 12 seconds to 6 seconds, and then we went from 6 seconds to 4 seconds. We went from 6 seconds to 4 seconds, decreased the page speed score, but increased AOV by about 40%. The client didn't care about his page speed score at that time, so that's really what it comes down to is user experience and how well it's performing.
Cool, awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Someone's ahead of me.
I'm here for a short while anyway, so yeah.
I had a quick question on those areas where like where you're hovering over a button. Say you go to the button, hover over for 2 seconds, and then like go somewhere else on the page, and then hover over again for another 2 seconds. Does that add together? Like they hovered over for a total of 4 seconds? Or is it gonna be
No, not necessarily. No, you could arrange that. You could that would only be a single JavaScript line of code. Any coder will be able to do that for you as a solution quite quickly and easily. You could do it that way. What I have done is it's set to only record scores higher than 4, so that you're only pulling the value. So if somebody hovers over there for 4. And then move down the page, and then the mouse just goes up the page, but like enters and exits every element in really quick time. Instead of giving everyone a score of 0 for as it just goes, because it will track everything in real time. It's ignoring really quick flash ones. So
for whatever reason they hover it over for 4 seconds, go somewhere else, and then go back to it for another 4 seconds.
It would still be a page speeder score as it stands, but you could add them together.
Okay.
Yeah, you could arrange that. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome.
Did I understand you to say that? By the way, Mike, we met each other the other night.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Did I understand you to say that the JavaScript in the container, it does not slow down page speed as long as it's not loading as part of like the header of the.
Yeah.
Because it's not actually loading until it's
the only way it can't affect page speed is if everything happens after the onload event. So really, you don't want it in the header or body code at all.
Okay,
so have GTM load in the head, and then create everything else comes on window loaded triggers. So, or I even create a custom event for after the window loaded event has passed, and do everything from there.
The event listeners are not actually in the GT container. Oh, I didn't understand.
No,
that.
just put the IDs in the code on the site. So all you're doing to the website, the only effect you can have on the page speed is you're adding in the IDs. It's not going to have any effect whatsoever. But then once it's loaded, we're then applying the tracks going into that. So yeah. Everything I do with tracking is for with the aim of having absolutely 0 effect on page speed. Hence that name. I'm not sure if you got one. It is. I put it on for fun.
Okay, is it possible for you to speak faster?
Question.
Yes. So, I mean, I've been setting up like custom events and Google Tag Manager and analytics and stuff like that. But how would you say that this whole process compares to just setting up regular events in Tag Manager?
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're tying values to little interactions. It's like someone clicks on the button. We don't want to track and score that because they clicked on a button. That'll go through to GA on a separate event, and we know that clicking the Add to Cart button is an Add to Cart event that's quite valuable because they've gone one step further. But then when they're on the Add to Cart page, you've got that score there. They're then, they're filling out the address and stuff like that. Shipping pops up, and then the session ends. You might want to score them on how long they pondered after that before deciding to leave, or that kind of thing. So it becomes more. We're going into those big gaps between events that we normally see, and being able to try and understand their thinking in that time, which is why it's behavioral and.
Interesting. And now, does that involve creating a lot of custom variables?
There's a lot of custom variables already in there. in the container. Yeah, but yeah, you have to be quite handy with the creating variables, which are usually quite easily, especially the data layer ones.
Okay. Cool. And then also one last question, as far as like creating new variables in the data layer, like one thing that I've really been trying to do lately is to get like enhanced e-commerce on a website, and get that to be part of the data layer. Like, how do you like append the data layer?
Yeah, quite easily. So you find out what variables are. So like like order total. If it's in say Shopify, you can create a Shopify object which is order.total, I think, in the squiggly brackets. But write that data layer into the website, not into GTM. So you're not pushing it from GTM, because once the page is loaded, it's all client side. The server's no longer doing anything. So you have to get the server to write those variables before it sends the document over. You do that by hard coding a data layer push. So I have like a data layer push Shopify objects, and I put them all in. And it's just one line, and then you're just pulling data layer variables over to GTM, really quick and easy.
So everything is uploaded onto the actual back end of the coding rather than through Tag Manager.
Yeah. You can put that right before the closing body tag as well if you're not using them during the page load, which you shouldn't be. So you can have it right down at the bottom of the code, data layer push Shopify objects, and then just have Shopify objects data layer variables.
Now, does there actually have to be like a purchasing function on the website? Like, so I work with a manufacturer that sends referral traffic to like their vendors, and there's not an actual like purchasing mechanism on their website. It's through the other websites. Is there a possibility to still track like revenue from a button click to another website?
Yeah, so cross-domain tracking, and it's just about making sure you get the variables all included. The variables are there, they're live all the time. So if you've got a data layer push with a load of variables in there, the moment that data layer push is read by GTM, it's populating all the custom variables inside of GTM with those values. It's just a trigger. When you get the trigger, so that might be a page view on an order confirmation page, could be the trigger, and you've got the script for tracking all of the variables. It's just then at that moment in time it takes a snapshot, and although the code's written in variables, the snapshot looks like product line, item number 1, item number 2, item number 3, SKUs, value, line total, and all the rest of it. That's how it gets received, and you can send that to wherever you want. But you can write your own triggers or your own scripts to get that at certain other times.
Okay.
So
cool.
yeah.
And then one more thing. So like for say like product ID and like product price, when you're creating that new appendage to the data layer, is that like something that you have to make specific for each individual product, like manually? Or
No, because the product itself is a dynamic variable. So you'd create one variable for product ID, another one for product price, and then whichever product is on the page, it should be populating those fields in the right ones. Okay. But it's understanding what variables the web server is using to pull the right image or the right price or the right title, etc. So you can tap into all of those variables. You might not even need to do a data layer push, because you might just be able to say, what is this headline piece, where it says product title, or is the product ID in the URL, so a query dynamic. If you can't get the right code in, there's a couple of other ways of pulling that data as well. So yeah.
Well, cool.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Cleared up a lot of my questions.
Yeah, good. Excellent.